On a cold winter afternoon, when the wind was biting and the snow covered every inch of the streets, Sarah found herself struggling to manage her daily chores. She was a mother of 2 young children, and like any parent, she had a never-ending list of things to do. That day, the weather had turned bitterly cold, and she had just finished her grocery shopping. She was walking home from the local store with heavy bags in hand, each step feeling more like a burden than the last. Her car had broken down earlier that week, and although she had hoped it would be fixed by now, the repairs were still pending. Sarah had planned to pick up her groceries and drive straight home, but with the car in the shop, she was left to carry her heavy load through the snow, feeling exhausted and defeated. The snowstorm had caught her by surprise, and soon the ground was covered in a thick layer of snow, making her path slippery and difficult. The weight of the bags seemed to get heavier with each passing step, and the chill in the air made it hard to focus on anything. Other than the discomfort she felt, her thoughts began to drift as she walked. She was thinking about how much she had to do once she got home, getting the kids to finish their homework, making dinner, preparing for the next day. She was feeling overwhelmed, and as she trudged through the snow, it seemed as though the world was against her. Every step felt harder than the last, and she began to wonder how she was going to get through the rest of the day. The bags of groceries were cutting into her hands, and her fingers were stiff from the cold. She looked ahead, hoping to see something familiar, but all she could see was an endless stretch of snow and empty streets. As Sarah rounded a corner, feeling like she was about to give up, something unexpected happened. A car pulled up beside her, and the driver, a man in his mid-40s, with a friendly face, rolled down his window. His warm smile immediately caught her attention, and his presence felt like a small beacon of hope in the bleakness of the day. He asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Sarah, a little hesitant at first, looked at the man. She had never seen him before, and she wasn't sure if it was safe to accept a ride from a stranger. But she was cold, tired, and on the verge of tears. She thought about how much easier it would be to just get home, and how grateful she would be to avoid walking any further through the snow. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded and climbed into the car. "Where are you headed?" the man asked, as Sarah settled into the passenger seat. "Just a few blocks down," she replied, trying to sound casual, but her exhaustion was clear. She felt a little embarrassed, but the kindness in his eyes reassured her as they drove. The man introduced himself as David. He told Sarah he was a local mechanic, just finishing his day's work. He asked her about her day, and Sarah explained the difficulties she had been facing, from the broken car to the challenges of balancing work and family life. As she spoke, David listened attentively, offering comforting words along the way. It was the first time all day that Sarah had felt like someone truly understood her struggles. By the time they reached her neighborhood, Sarah had begun to feel a sense of relief that she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the fact that she didn't have to walk home in the snow. It was the simple human connection she had experienced in that short ride. David wasn't just a stranger offering her a lift. He was someone who had taken the time to listen, to offer comfort, and to show kindness without expecting anything in return. The warmth of the car had done more than just keep the cold away, had lifted her spirits and reminded her that there were good people in the world. When they arrived at her house, David insisted on helping Sarah with her groceries. She protested at first, not wanting to impose, but he simply smiled and walked around to the trunk to grab the bags. Together, they made their way up the path to her front door. When they reached the porch, Sarah was almost in tears, not because of the exhaustion, but because of the kindness that had been shown to her that day. As they said their goodbyes, David mentioned that he was happy to help, and told her that he would be willing to take a look at her car the next day, free of charge. Sarah tried to thank him, but words didn't seem enough. She felt overwhelmed with gratitude, knowing that her day had been made so much easier by the generosity of a stranger. The next morning, David arrived at Sarah's house to take a look at her car. True to his word, he fixed the issue quickly and efficiently, saving her both time and money. Sarah offered to pay him, but he refused, insisting that the kindness he had shown was enough. He reminded her that sometimes people just need a little help, and that it was important to pay it forward when she could. Sarah was touched by his humility and kindness. As David left, Sarah stood in the doorway, watching him drive away. She felt like her faith in humanity had been restored. What had started as a cold, difficult day had turned into one of the warmest and most memorable experiences of her life. In a world that often feels disconnected and rushed, she had encountered someone who had taken the time to help a stranger simply because it was the right thing to do. The kindness she had received from David would stay with her for a long time, reminding her that even in the hardest of times, there are still people who care. From that day forward, Sarah made a promise to herself that she would also try to show kindness whenever she could, even in the smallest ways. Whether it was offering a smile to a stranger, helping a neighbor with their groceries, or offering a listening ear, she knew that these little acts of kindness had the power to make a big difference in someone's life, just as David had helped her when she needed it most. She wanted to be that person for someone else one day, as Sarah looked out the window. Watching her children play in the snow, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. Life might not always be easy, but she now knew that there were kind-hearted people in the world who could turn even the most challenging moments into something beautiful. And for that, she was incredibly grateful. David's kindness had changed her day. But more than that, it had changed her outlook on the world. She realized that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can have the greatest impact, and that each of us has the power to make a difference in someone's life. Lily had always been a determined young woman. She was a full-time college student, juggling classes and multiple part-time jobs just to make ends meet. Life wasn't easy, and she often felt like she was running on empty. Yet, she carried on, driven by the hope that one day it would all pay off. Every day was a balancing act trying to get good grades, earn enough money to cover rent, and still make time for friends and family. Some days it felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. On a crisp fall morning, Lily was feeling especially drained. She had an important exam in just a few days, and the pressure was starting to get to her. Between studying, working, and the exhaustion of trying to keep everything together, she felt like she was falling behind. She had barely gotten any sleep the night before, and had spent the entire morning revising for her exam. She could feel the exhaustion settling in, and the thought of facing another long day was overwhelming. She knew she needed some caffeine to keep her energy up. So, as usual, she decided to stop by the coffee shop near her campus before heading to work. The little cafe was one of her favorite places. It was warm, cozy, and offered a sense of peace in the chaos of her daily life. When she stepped inside, the comforting smell of fresh coffee beans filled the air, and the soft hum of conversations and clinking mugs created a familiar sense of calm. Lily ordered her usual, a large cappuccino with extra foam, her favorite drink after long study sessions. As she waited for her order, she stood at the counter, lost in her thoughts. Her mind kept racing thoughts of assignments, deadlines, and the looming exam filled every corner of her brain. She didn't even notice when the barista, a friendly young woman named Mia, handed her the cappuccino. "Here you go," Mia said with a warm smile. Lily gave her a distracted smile and reached for her drink, barely acknowledging the kindness in Mia's cheerful voice. She paid for her coffee and started to walk away, but then Mia stopped her. "Actually, I've got a little surprise for you today," Mia said. "This coffee is on the house. It's already paid for." Lily paused and looked at Mia, confused. She glanced around the cafe, but there was no one in line behind her. "What do you mean? Is someone else paying for it?" Mia smiled again, pointing to a small note on the counter next to where Lily had picked up her drink. The note read, "A random act of kindness for you. Someone believes in you." Lily stared at the note for a few moments, her heart warming at the gesture. She hadn't expected anything like this to happen, especially on a day when she was feeling so overwhelmed. It wasn't just the free coffee, it was the thought behind it, the idea that someone out there cared enough to do something kind for a complete stranger. She had no idea who had paid for the drink, but in that moment, she felt a little less alone in the world. The kindness, though simple, gave her a sense of hope. "Wow, thank you," Lily said, still feeling a little stunned. She took the note and tucked it into her bag as a reminder of the unexpected kindness she had just received. As she sipped her coffee, Lily's mood began to lift. She could feel the warmth from the drink spreading through her, But it was more than just the physical warmth. There was a deeper sense of comfort that came from the kindness of others. It was as though that small act of generosity had brightened her entire day. She was still stressed about her exam and all the work that awaited her. But for the first time that morning, she didn't feel so weighed down. The world felt a little lighter, and Lily realized that sometimes the smallest moments could make the biggest difference. With her coffee in hand, Lily left the cafe and walked toward her next job, feeling more energized than before. The day seemed a little less daunting now, and as she walked through the bustling streets, she began to notice other small acts of kindness happening around her. A woman helped an elderly man carry his groceries. A stranger gave up their seat on the crowded bus for someone who looked tired, and a child smiled at her as they walked past. It was as if the kindness she had received in the coffee shop had opened her eyes to the kindness that was already around her. Later that evening, Lily found herself at work, serving tables at a local restaurant. The job was hard and often exhausting, but she didn't mind it. She liked meeting new people, and the tips she earned helped cover her bills. On this particular night, she was assigned to a table with a couple who looked like they had just gotten off a long flight. They were tired, a little frazzled, but still friendly. After taking their order, Lily went about her tasks, trying her best to make their experience pleasant. When she brought their food to the table, the couple smiled at her. They thanked her for being so attentive and asked if she was okay. Lily, who was used to putting on a brave face, hesitated for a moment. She wasn't one to openly share her struggles with strangers, but something about their kindness made her feel comfortable enough. To share a little bit of her story, "I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed," she admitted, offering a small smile. "I've got a lot going on right now. School, work, and just life in general." The woman across from her nodded in understanding. "I can imagine. Sometimes it feels like life just piles everything on you all at once, doesn't it?" Lily chuckled softly. "Exactly. It's like one thing after another." The woman smiled warmly. "Well, don't forget to take care of yourself, too. It's easy to get caught up in everything else, but you deserve a break, even if it's just a moment to breathe." The couple continued to chat with Lily, offering words of encouragement and reminding her that it was okay to ask for help when she needed it. They didn't just talk about the challenges of life. They also shared stories of their own experiences, reminding her that everyone goes through difficult times, and sometimes all it takes is reaching out to others to find support. As the couple left, they gave Lily an extra generous tip. It was more than she had expected, and it felt like another small act of kindness that had come her way. She thanked them and watched as they walked out the door. Feeling grateful for the positive energy they had shared with her, the day had started with so much stress and uncertainty. But now, as Lily closed the restaurant for the night, she felt a sense of peace. The kindness she had received that morning, combined with the encouragement from the couple, had given her a renewed sense of strength. She was reminded that even when life felt overwhelming, there were always people who were willing to lend a helping hand, even in the smallest of ways. As Lily walked home that night, she realized that sometimes the best way to get through tough times was to embrace the kindness around her and to pass it on when she could. She wasn't alone, and neither was anyone else. Everyone had their struggles, but everyone also had the capacity for kindness and connection, and that, in itself, was something worth holding on to. When Lily woke up the next morning, she took the note from the coffee shop out of her bag. She smiled as she read the words again, "Someone believes in you." And in that moment, Lily realized that she believed in herself too. The kindness she had received had sparked something inside her, reminding her that she was capable of facing whatever challenges came her way. And if she could, she would be sure to spread that kindness forward, just as others had done for her. Javier had recently moved to the city, leaving behind the small town he had grown up in. He was excited about the change, but it also came with a lot of uncertainty. Everything was new to people. The streets, even the sounds of the city felt different. It wasn't easy for him to adjust, and as he wandered through the bustling streets, he often found himself feeling lost and out of place. The noise of traffic, the crowds, the tall buildings that seemed to go on forever, all of it was overwhelming at times. One morning, after a few weeks in the city, Javier needed to run an errand. He had to visit a local store to buy a few things for his new apartment, and he figured it would be a simple task. He had a list and was feeling a little more confident about navigating the city. The store was just a few blocks away from his apartment, so he thought it would be a quick trip. He had walked the route a few times before, so he felt he knew where he was going. But that day something felt different. The streets seemed more crowded than usual, and Javier found himself distracted by the noise and fast pace of the city. Before he knew it, he had taken a wrong turn. He glanced around, realizing he was no longer where he thought he was. The streets looked unfamiliar, and the buildings around him didn't seem to match anything he had seen before. His heart started to race a little. He hadn't planned for this, and now he was unsure of how to get back to the main road. He had no idea where he was, and it seemed like everyone around him was in a hurry. Walking with purpose and not paying attention to the newcomer who seemed out of place, Javier tried to retrace his steps. But the more he walked, the more confused he became. The city felt bigger than he had imagined, and he was starting to feel a little panicked. He was on his own in this unfamiliar place, and although he was sure he would figure it out eventually, he couldn't help but feel lost and isolated as he reached a busy intersection. He paused for a moment, hoping to get his bearings. He stood on the corner, looking both ways, trying to make sense of the streets that seemed to be moving in all directions. He felt a sense of urgency, but also a growing anxiety. The last thing he wanted was to stand out as someone who didn't belong. He just wanted to find his way back and feel like he knew where he was going. Just then, a woman approached the crosswalk from the opposite side of the street. She was holding a coffee cup in one hand and a bag in the other, walking briskly toward the crossing. She glanced at Javier, who was standing there, looking a little lost. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice friendly and full of concern. Javier was a little surprised by her approach. He hadn't expected anyone to notice him, let alone ask if he was okay. He had been so caught up in his own thoughts that he hadn't even realized how much he had been pacing, trying to figure out which direction to go. "I think I'm a little lost," Javier admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I was trying to get to a store, but now I'm not sure where I am." The woman smiled warmly, as if she understood exactly how he felt. "I know the city can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're new here. Don't worry, it happens to a lot of people. I can help you out." Javier felt a wave of relief wash over him. The kindness in her voice made him feel more at ease. He was grateful that she hadn't brushed him off like so many others might have. The woman introduced herself as Maria and explained that she had lived in the city for a few years. "I can walk you to the store if you'd like," she offered. "It's not far, and I'm headed that way too." "I'll help you get there, no problem." Javier didn't hesitate to accept her offer. He had no idea how long it would have taken him to figure things out on his own. Besides, it felt good to know that there was someone willing to help. Maria led the way as they began to walk down the street together. As they walked, she struck up a conversation, asking him about how he was adjusting to the city. Javier explained how everything felt so different and a bit overwhelming, and how he was still figuring out the best routes to take. Maria listened intently and shared some of her own experiences when she had first moved to the city. She told him that it had taken time for her to feel comfortable and that it was okay to feel lost every now and then. "The city can be intimidating at first," she said, "but once you get the hang of it, you'll find your way around just fine. It's all part of the process." Javier was surprised by how much better he felt just talking to someone who understood. Maria had a way of making the whole experience seem less daunting, and her calm, reassuring attitude helped to ease his anxiety. As they walked together, they passed by people rushing to work, students heading to class, and families out for a stroll. For the first time since he had arrived in the city, Javier felt a little less out of place. The city didn't seem so big and intimidating with Maria by his side. She had made it feel smaller, more manageable, and less overwhelming. They continued walking for a few more blocks, chatting about various things along the way. Maria asked Javier about his work and where he was from, and Javier shared stories from his hometown. They laughed about some of the silly things that had happened during his move, and Maria offered some advice about the best places to visit in the city, the hidden gems that only locals knew about. Finally, they arrived at the store, and Javier felt a sense of accomplishment. Not only had he found his way, but he had also made a new friend in the process. Maria had made a simple gesture offering to help someone who was lost, but it had made a world of difference to Javier. Her kindness had turned a stressful situation into a positive experience, and it reminded him that there were still people out there who cared enough to lend a hand when needed, before they said goodbye. Maria gave him one last piece of advice. Remember, it's okay to ask for help. People are often more willing to help than you might think. And when you get the chance, help someone else too. The world works better when we all look out for each other. Javier thanked her sincerely, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had not only found his way to the store, but had also found a reminder of the kindness that still existed in the world. As he walked into the store, he couldn't help but feel more hopeful about his new life in the city. The road ahead might still be full of challenges, but he now knew that he didn't have to face them alone. There were people like Maria who were willing to lend a hand when it mattered most. And for that, Javier felt thankful. Jason had always been someone who prided himself on being independent. As a businessman, he had worked hard to get where he was. He knew that success didn't come easy, but through years of dedication, he had built up his career and a comfortable life. He had the kind of routine that many people envied. He was always busy, but he liked it that way. His schedule was packed with meetings, emails, and calls. Yet, despite his hectic lifestyle, he never thought of himself as someone who had everything figured out. He knew there were challenges and struggles that no one saw behind the polished exterior. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Jason found himself walking to his car, eager to go home and unwind. He had been pushing through a busy week, and the pressure was starting to take its toll. His mind was racing with thoughts of work, and he felt like he needed a little break to recharge. As he walked toward his car, he passed by a busy intersection near his office building. The street was crowded with people heading home from work, some lost in their own thoughts, others rushing to get to their next destination. As Jason reached the intersection, he noticed a homeless man sitting on the corner. The man was holding a sign that read, "Hungry, please help." Ouch. And he had a weathered face that spoke of a life filled with hardship. He was sitting on a piece of cardboard, his clothes tattered and worn. Jason had seen homeless people before, of course, but something about this man caught his attention. Maybe it was the quiet desperation in his eyes or the way he looked so out of place on a busy street filled with people who seemed to be rushing toward their next appointment. Jason's first instinct was to keep walking. After all, he had no idea how to help. He had always been taught to be cautious in situations like these. The city was busy, and he had his own life to focus on. But as he took a few more steps, something inside him made him pause. He stood still for a moment, watching the man on the corner. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he could do. It was easy to walk by, to pretend like he hadn't noticed, to convince himself that he was just one person in a city full of people. But something about the moment made him reconsider. Jason took a deep breath, turned around, and walked back toward the man sitting on the corner. As he approached, he could feel the weight of the decision he was about to make. It wasn't that he hadn't seen homeless people before or hadn't thought about helping in the past. It was just that he had never been in a position to act. Jason stopped in front of the man and gave him a small smile. "Hey, how are you doing?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though he felt a little out of his element. The homeless man looked up at him, his face lined with years of hardship. "I'm doing okay," the man replied, his voice low and gravelly. "Just trying to make it through the day." Jason stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. He had no idea what this man's life had been like, or what he was going through. But he could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he seemed to carry a burden far heavier than anyone should have to bear. "I don't have much," Jason said, fumbling for words. "But I can get you some food. Would you like that?" The man's eyes softened, and a small smile appeared on his face. "That would be nice, thank you," he said. Jason didn't hesitate. Without another word, he walked into the nearby restaurant, a small, family-owned diner that he often visited for lunch. He placed an order for a hearty meal, something that would give the man the warmth and nourishment he needed. The diner staff knew him well, and when he explained that the meal was for someone outside, they didn't hesitate to prepare it. Jason wasn't sure why he felt so strongly about this man, but he knew he had to do something. When the meal was ready, Jason took the warm package and walked back to the corner where the man had been sitting. He handed it to him, and the man's face lit up. For a moment, Jason forgot about his own busy life and the stress he had been feeling all day. There was something deeply satisfying about the simple act of giving. "Thank you," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." Jason nodded, not really knowing what to say. "I hope it helps," he said simply, trying to hide the lump that had formed in his throat. The man opened the package, and the smell of the warm food filled the air. He began to eat, savoring each bite as if it were the first meal he had had in days. Jason stood there for a moment, watching the man eat. There was no grand gesture, no applause, no one to notice. It was just one person helping another. A brief moment of connection between two strangers in a busy city. As Jason turned to leave, he felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't about the food or the money, it was about the kindness. It was about taking a moment to acknowledge another person's humanity, to reach out and show that someone cared. The next day, Jason thought about the man he had helped. He couldn't shake the image of the man sitting there, eating the meal Jason had brought him. It wasn't a grand act of charity, but it had made a difference. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could have the most profound impact. Jason realized that the man hadn't just needed food, he had needed someone to see him, to recognize his existence, and to offer help without judgment. The experience stayed with Jason throughout the day. It made him think about how often he rushed through life, caught up in the demands of work, the constant drive for success. He had been so focused on his own goals that he had forgotten what really mattered: connecting with others, offering kindness, and making the world a little bit better. One small act at a time. Over the next few weeks, Jason continued to see the homeless man on the corner. Sometimes he would walk past, and other times he would stop and say hello. Every time they spoke, the man's face brightened. Jason never offered more than a kind word or a small gesture, but it was clear that these interactions meant something to both of them. In a world that often felt rushed and impersonal, their brief exchanges were reminders of the importance of compassion and human connection. One evening, as Jason passed the corner again, he saw the man sitting there, just like before. This time, however, there was a small bag of groceries next to him. Jason stopped and smiled, walking over to the man. "Looks like you've got some food," Jason said, surprised. The man looked up and smiled back. "Yeah, I've been doing a little better lately. I found a part-time job. It's not much, but it's something. I've been able to get by." Jason's heart lifted at the news. "That's great to hear. I'm really glad." The man nodded. "It's amazing what a little kindness can do. You showed me that there's still good in the world," Jason smiled, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude in his heart. Sometimes helping others didn't just change their lives, it changed yours too. And that day, standing there with the man, Jason realized that true success wasn't measured by his business achievements, but by the kindness he was able to give and receive. Emily had always been a strong and independent woman, but life had a way of testing her strength. As a single mother of 2 young children, she was no stranger to challenges. Every day felt like a juggling, a getting the kids to school on time, working long hours to provide for her family, and still finding time to take care of her home. The exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but she'd never let it show. She was determined to make sure her kids had everything they needed and that they felt loved and supported. That particular day had been one of those days, when everything seemed to go wrong. Emily had been up early, trying to prepare breakfast and get the kids ready for school. Her son Lucas had spilled cereal all over the kitchen floor, and her daughter Mia had forgotten her lunch at home. She was running late for work and had no time to fix anything. As she rushed out the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was barely keeping it all together. At work, things didn't get any better. She was working as a receptionist at a local office, answering calls and scheduling appointments. The day was busy, and the constant demands from customers and coworkers left her feeling drained. By the time her lunch break arrived, she was physically and emotionally exhausted. She sat in the break room, eating her sandwich in silence, trying to gather enough energy to make it through the rest of the day. When her shift ended, Emily was ready to go home and collapse into bed. But as she walked to her car, she noticed something unusual. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the familiar sight of her front porch, which was usually empty and quiet. That evening, however, it was filled with toys, bags of groceries, and household supplies. A large box sat in the middle of the yard, filled with things she hadn't expected in a million years. At first, Emily thought she was imagining things. She rubbed her eyes and looked again, but it was real. There, on her front porch, were groceries enough to last for weeks. There were also bags filled with school supplies for her children, and even a new set of winter clothes for them. She walked closer, her mind racing with questions. Who had done this? Why? As she approached, she noticed a small envelope on the top of the box. The envelope was addressed to her in neat handwriting, and as she opened it, a note inside read, "Your community cares. You are not alone." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she stood there, overwhelmed by the kindness that had been shown to her. She couldn't believe it. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. She had always taken care of others, but never had anyone done something like this for her. The generosity of this gesture was something she would never forget. For a moment, she just stood there, taking it all in. She couldn't help but wonder how this had all come together. Who had organized this? How did they know what she needed, and why? She didn't have answers, but in that moment, she didn't care. The kindness of the people in her community had given her a sense of relief that she hadn't felt in a long time. Her children, Lucas and Mia, came running out the front door when they saw her standing there with tears in her eyes. They asked her what was going on, and Emily smiled through her tears, trying to explain the unbelievable surprise. She didn't have the words to describe what she was feeling, but her kids could see the joy in her face. Together, they began to unpack the bags and sort through the items. There were new clothes for both of them, including winter jackets, shoes, and even new toys. Emily hadn't been able to afford to buy them anything new in months, and seeing their faces light up as they discovered the surprises made her heart swell with gratitude. As they unpacked, Emily noticed something else. There were also toiletries, cleaning supplies, and even gift cards to local stores. Whoever had done this had thought of everything. She felt both humbled and amazed that someone, or a group of people, had taken the time and effort to help her and her family. It was as if they had seen the struggles she had been facing and decided to show her that she wasn't alone, that people cared about her well-being. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake in bed, thinking about the kindness that had come her way. She thought about how she had been struggling to make ends meet and how it had often felt like no one noticed. She had always prided herself on being strong, but in moments of weakness, she had felt isolated, as if no one understood the weight she was carrying. Now, however, that weight felt a little lighter. The love and generosity of her community had shown her that there were people who cared, people who were willing to lend a hand when needed. The next day, Emily went to work with a renewed sense of hope. She couldn't stop thinking about the gifts that had been left for her, and she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had always believed in the goodness of people, but now she had experienced it firsthand. She was determined to pay it forward to find ways to help others just as she had been helped at work. Her coworkers noticed the change in her demeanor. She was smiling more, and her energy seemed brighter. One of her colleagues, noticing how happy Emily seemed, asked what had happened. Emily explained everything's a surprise on her porch: the groceries, the toys, and the kindness of the community. Her colleague was moved, and Emily shared how much it had meant to her, how it had reminded her of the power of kindness. As Emily spoke, her coworker smiled warmly. "It's amazing, isn't it? How kindness can change everything. It doesn't always have to be big gestures. Sometimes, just a little bit of kindness goes a long way." Emily nodded. "You're right, and it's made me realize that I can do more. I can help others, just like I was helped. It's something I want to do." Over the next few weeks, Emily began to get involved in local community programs. She volunteered her time at the food bank, helped organize events for families in need, and started to offer small acts of kindness wherever she could. Every time she helped someone else, she remembered how it had felt when she had been the one receiving help. She didn't need to do something extraordinary, just the simple act of showing someone that they mattered. Her children noticed the change in her as well. They began to volunteer with her, helping with community projects and learning about the importance of kindness. Emily realized that this experience had not only changed her life, but it also impacted the lives of her children. They were learning the value of generosity, empathy, and helping others. Just as she had learned as the months went by, Emily's life began to feel more balanced. She still faced challenges. Life wasn't suddenly perfect, but she now knew that she didn't have to face them alone. She had the support of her community, and she had the strength to make it through. She had been reminded that kindness wasn't just about receiving help, but about giving it as well. It was a cycle that could continue, growing stronger with each act of goodwill. One evening, as Emily sat on her porch with her children, looking at the sunset, she felt a sense of peace. The road had been tough, but with the support of those around her, she had found a way to keep moving forward. And she knew that no matter what life brought her way, she would always have the power to make a difference both in her own life and in the lives of others. And that, she realized, was the most beautiful gift of all.